All right, so this week is not a very good week for us, really.
Oh, what can I say? We're busy. Something came up tonight, it being Monday, and things seem to come up on Mondays. And Tuesday, I'm going to a party with Emily in the Rainbow Room, so that's out. And Wednesday, I guess we'll do a normal show. And then Thursday, we're preparing for the New York Anime Festival.
So you're not going to get much in the way of full-on Geek Nights, but that's okay because we did a little experimental feed for you there, which is actually something we were going to put on DVD way back when. But the
DVD that's done, but we never actually made.
Well, because the DVDs, upon further inspection, proved to be an impractical idea, pretty much.
Well, not so. I mean,
because we'd have to make them like a 2 DVD set, and it would take a lot of money to print them, and there wasn't that much demand.
Or we could have printed them double-sided.
That too, but it wasn't very practical.
It also would have been more practical if we decided not to give better audio quality.
Yeah, that's also true.
I mean, people said, yeah, just put the lossless, and I don't think people realize that every episode of Geeknights, even in FLAC form, is a good 130 megabytes.
Yeah, if we would have put it lossless, it would have been like a 20 DVD set, probably more than that, for just one season. So that was impractical. So we put the outtakes reel that was going to be on the DVD in the experimental feed because Rim finally decided to do something. He's still sitting on a pile of unused audio over there, though.
Yeah, well, that audio all originally had a purpose. I don't know. I guess I'll start putting a lot of it in the experimental feed.
Yeah, I mean, over time, we've sort of accumulated all this audio we were going to use for something, and we never did.
Well,
so
the problem is I have so much, but a lot of it, like, I have a great recording of a bunch of us playing Lacuna, but it's like 3 hours long. Even if I encode it awesomely, it's still bigger than Libsyn.
Yeah, we need some more Libsyn action before we can really start uploading a lot of other stuff besides the usual shows.
Plus, I wonder who wants to listen to us play 3 hours of Lacuna.
Someone who really is interested in Lacuna and has nothing better to do? I don't know. Anyway, so we were actually going to almost skip out on doing a show today, but there's something I really wanted to talk about. There's some big news is going on. So we decided to do a special where we just talk about this one or two big newses that go together. And the big news have to do with Verizon, by the way, if you haven't been paying attention to the tech world.
You know, Verizon, that company that does what do they do? I mean, I don't really interact with them that often. It's not like I use Verizon stuff every day.
But you do.
Yeah, I do. Verizon is pretty much one of the big iron telecommunications companies of the world.
Well, at least in the United States, and especially over here in New York where we live, they are, in present day, the phone company. And they are also our cell phone company as well.
Well, I was Sprint. I stupidly switched to Verizon. But I feel like if I went back, I would be saying I stupidly switched back to Sprint. So I don't know what I'm going to do.
I think, while it seems like this, it's like, wow, Verizon's evil. Wow, Sprint sucks. Wow, everyone's AT&T's evil, right? So really, the only choice where you can't say, damn, I'm stupidly giving money to someone who's evil is not have a cell phone.
Well, no, but then I need a landline. And I don't want to get into that.
But you know what? If you want to get a landline here, it's Verizon. So,
aha!
Right. So, way back in the olden days in the United States, there was one phone company.
It was called the phone company.
It was AT&T. It was the Big Bell.
American was telegraph and telephone.
Yeah, something like that. Anyway, back in those days, if you wanted a telephone, you paid them, a fee for all the long distance and, your local phone calls and whatever. Every month you paid the phone bill, right? But they also gave you a telephone. Well, they didn't give you the telephone. You rented the telephone from them. Sort of like how you rent your cable box from your cable company. And you couldn't just get any old telephone you wanted. You got the telephone they gave you.
Now, there were a lot of reasons for that. It wasn't really evil. It's not like the first phone company effectively in the world was thinking, oh man, we're going to totally fuck the consumers. What they were thinking is, one, this is new technology. It's expensive and complicated technology. I mean, think about it. The telephone, a regular landline with like a rotary dial or something, that may not seem like the most technologically advanced thing today, but that was a big deal back then. Mm-hmm. A really big deal. Yep. And the network was very kind of cobbled together. I mean, remember the days of the night? Well, maybe not remember, but in the 80s and early 90s, there was, phone phreaking, and the telecommunications network of this country was very primitive compared to what it is today. And it had a lot of voltages and things. And it'd be like a telephone back then, theoretically, could take down the entire network.
Well, not really, but
Well, it could take down a small section of the network and it could cascade. And
maybe. See, the logic the phone companies used for forcing everyone to use the telephone they gave them was, we don't want you to use a device that we haven't tested, with our equipment. Because you might damage our equipment or something like that.
I do believe that back then it was a valid concern.
Well, it wasn't super valid, but it did have some validity. But it wasn't like, oh man, people with their own phones are just going to destroy everything. It was like, well, there's a chance it could happen. And, basically because everyone was just using the same equipment on this network, it's sort of like, if you have a thing and you're testing it for bugs, but you only keep pushing, it has like 5 buttons, but you only keep pushing the first button, you never know what those other buttons are going to do. So when they finally, allowed all sorts of other things to be plugged into the phone lines, all sorts of, touch tone phones and whatever people came up with, that's when, people started finding out, oh, look, we can do this crazy stuff with the phone network, which was something they never worried about before because the only devices anyone was using were the ones they gave them, and they weren't able to find those things out or anything.
Well, plus, just think, back then, the phones were basically just copper cables that had barely any useful logic between them.
Right.
There were human switches.
Yep.
Human.
So what happened eventually is they said, all right, you guys have to let anyone use whatever they want, whatever phone they want. You can't just force people to rent your phones. And actually, this is a lot better for the phone company because what they didn't realize was allowing anyone to use whatever device they wanted on the network, right, and use the network in any way they could make it get used, was that people started finding new uses for the phone network, like, calling in and like having phone sex or buying stuff over the phone, and because people could hook up auto dialers or there'd be telemarketing, and because there was other devices allowed to be plugged into the phone network besides the phones from the phone company, people found all these new uses for the phone network, and thus the phone network got a lot more use overall, and the phone company got a lot more money from people using the phone network because they still own the network and you still have to pay to use it. You could just use it in any way that you could find to use it instead of the one way they let you use it. So, go to the present day, and you have cell phones, at least in the United States. Other countries, it's actually good.
As an
or
aside,
more good.
I think we should do at some point a show on just the history, straight up technologically, of the phone networks.
But that's the history that I know.
Well, I see it.
You've already got everything I know.
Well, no, I'll say this. I didn't, because Scott basically said, I'm going to do the big old Verizon show, and I pretty much let him just run with it however he wanted. And I wasn't sure where he was going with it, so I figure I'd like to talk about the history of, the national phone company, and then they broke it up, and then why, like, different companies now have control of different areas and all the deregulation. And
Yep.
But I think that's another show.
Well, I know what happened, but I don't know any more than, you'll learn a little more about the history of the U.S. phone companies and networks from Wikipedia than you will learn from me. All right, so, anyway.
I know a bit, but I took a class on that at RIT, so.
See, I didn't take class on that. Anyway. So, fast forward to today, to cell phone companies in the United States. Now, there's not just one, like there was just one AT&T back in the day.
There's two!
Well, there's like 4 or 5, and then there's local operators, and there's MVNOs. So there's actually competition in this arena.
Yeah, but at the same time, it seems like most people, your real choices are between Sprint and Verizon.
Well, that's only because where we live. You also have the AT&T and T-Mobile are legitimate choices.
Yeah, but it depends on where you live. I mean, if you live somewhere out in the boonies, you pretty much don't have a choice in a lot of cases. It's just
you might just not be able to use one out there, and you have to.
Or like when I lived in the mountains over by Pokeware, right? Verizon got service just fine. You could not have a Sprint phone out there. It just didn't work. No. And T-Mobile,
Well, T-Mobile actually, and some other people, they offer there's phones with Wi-Fi now. And what you can do is, let's say you live in the boonies, but you have a Wi-Fi router in your house.
Because I could get Wi-Fi out there.
You plug your wireless router into your
wireless
cable
router
modem?
Into what? There's no cable modems out there.
Your DSL?
There's no DSL out there.
Your T1?
There's no way to get a T1
Well, that's the super
there.
boonies then.
That's not the super boonies. That's like 30 miles from here.
Anyway.
To the left. Right there.
Point is, is that the way these companies operate in the U.S. right now is if you want a cell phone, you go to their store, the Verizon store. You don't go to the Nokia store, where they have, there's no such thing. You don't buy a phone from the people who make the phones. You buy a phone from the phone company. And they have a bunch of phones to choose from, and they'll talk about how they support consumer choice because they've got all these phones to choose from, and all these different. There's a solution for everybody, and they do. They have phones ranging from the cheap to the crazy. So you go there and you pick out a phone, and the phone is ludicrously cheap, like $100 for what would usually be a $300 phone.
Oftentimes they're free.
Oftentimes they are free. I mean, the iPhone is $400. In any other country, it's like $1,000 if it's not from the phone company.
And like my current phone, it's a Motorola Razr. I paid $0 for it, and it was actually the crappiest cell phone they had to offer. It was just free, and I didn't care.
Yeah, but that was like a $300 device if you bought it alone.
Yeah, because it's a very advanced piece of technology.
Yep. But it's free because the way they operate is they subsidize the phone, which means that they pay for the phone basically. They eat that cost. But you have to sign this big, long contract, usually 2 or more years, which means you're stuck with that phone, and you're usually stuck with the phone, but you're stuck with them as your cell phone provider for at least 2 years, paying that monthly bill. And if you do the math, they win on that, because if they give you a $300 phone for like $50, you're going to be giving them $250 in like a few months, and then the rest of those months is pretty much the profits. And if you actually start using, their network for stuff, they're going to make a lot more money because they'll charge you for this and they'll charge you for that.
Yeah, that's one thing. I mean, I remember I didn't really use the feature because my first cell phone was basically
calling, and that's it.
It didn't have a screen. It was a brick. And it lasted maybe an hour, and it was analog and horrible. And I remember Scott's first cell phone was a great phone for the time for calling, but it didn't really do anything else.
It did. It had some stuff in it, but it had a web browser, but it was...
Yeah, it had a web browser, technically.
Yeah. Anyway, so the other thing that's a problem here is that, let's say they give you a phone that can text message. That's great. But they charge you. Every text message you send, you have to pay for. And unless you want to get the unlimited text message plan.
But that's like $15 a month.
Right. So it's sort of like you have to pay for text messaging. You can listen to music on this thing. But unless you're a elite person like me, you're not going to be able to get music on there because you have no idea how the hell to do that. And... now the only way you know how to get music on there is to buy it from the Verizon store in your phone, and they charge you for that. Oh, you can play games on your phone. Oh, but the only way you can get games on there that's easy is to buy games on your phone for like $5. And some games you even have to pay like a monthly fee for.
I mean, I remember my cell phone, as opposed to my parents' cell phone that they gave me, was Sprint. All right. And one day I got a phone that could take pictures. It could take pictures. Oh, man. And I took a picture. I'm like, all right, great. Now, how do I get this on my computer? And Sprint was like, oh, well, if you pay for the $15 a month, get pictures off your phone service.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Imagine if you bought a digital camera at the store, you took a bunch of pictures, and then every time you wanted to take the pictures off the camera and put them on your computer, you had to pay money.
Even worse, back then, there was no option with my phone or with Sprint at that time of getting like a picture off and paying a nickel or whatever. It was just
with my Verizon phone, the official way to get the pictures off was to pay 25 cents for every photo you wanted to get off and basically email it from the phone to yourself and then download the attachment.
I couldn't even do that. I had to pay $15 a month to get the service, which was get pictures off your phone.
Like, because I knew what I was doing, I could, I bought a USB cable for like $15, plugged it into my phone, and I was able to get the pictures off with some trickiness. But most people can't do that.
Well, plus, sometimes you can't do that. I mean, my phone, we looked, there was no way to do it.
Yep. So they give you these phones with all these features, but then they charge you every time you use the features, and that's to make up for the fact that they subsidize the phone crazily. Well,
Scott, what if me, being a smart consumer, decides that it's worth it to say, buy the phone from the company, because I know what I want, so I get the Nokia whatever awesome.
And you pay $600 for it.
Yeah, all right, but I got all the functionality, it's a phone. And then I just use it with Sprint or Verizon.
Well, first of all...
I'm asking a question that's pointed.
Well, it depends, because for example, the Nokia N95... You can't really use that with Verizon because Verizon's a CDMA EVDU network, and the Nokia N95, most of the world uses GSM, GPRS, Edge, and HSDPA, and those technologies. Verizon and Sprint use CDMA, EVDU. EVDU's actually better than the competition, but those sorts of technologies. So, like a Verizon phone, even if Verizon wasn't evil, you just couldn't use it with, say, T-Mobile because it's a different radio. It just won't work. Period. The same way like an iPhone. An iPhone won't work with Verizon. It has a different radio in it. There's nothing you can do short of replacing the radio in the phone and then replacing the firmware in the phone. And that's not something a hacker is capable of doing. You basically have to make a whole new device.
Yeah, now there are a lot of reasons for why America uses these different standards generally, and it's not 100% just, they're evil. There's also a lot of people, when they complain about American technology, seem to forget that America's big.
Yep.
And that, you could pretty much redo all of the cell service for a nation like Israel or Japan in a relatively small number of years.
And think about it. Israel, the state of Israel, which that's one of the few places that also uses CDMA, is about the size of the state of New Jersey, right? So if you wanted to upgrade cell phone service to be stupidly fast and upgrade internet and telephone to be stupidly fast in Israel, it would take you not very long if you had the resources to do it, which they do. Now you want to do that to the entire United States of America, where you have a state like New York right next to New Jersey, which is like 5 New Jerseys, and you got California, and you got Alaska, and you got Texas.
Yeah, New Jersey is one of our smaller states.
Yeah, all right. So because the United States is so geographically huge, and there's people all over it, sure, people in New York City, they can get some stuff, but it doesn't work out.
Even New York City is pretty big, and some of those technologies run into problems of there's too many people in one place, so it doesn't work as well.
For example, right, the office building that I work in, right, there's no cable in that building. You get telephone lines from Verizon. You can get DSL. You can get a T1 or something. You can't get fiber into the building. They have to use a satellite dish to get television, and that's it. They don't let anything else in the building. There's no cable. You have no choice.
And that's in New York.
That's in like Manhattan. You can't get fast internet, no matter how much you're going to pay for it.
Now, granted, part of that is that your building management is probably not the sharpest tech in the tool shed.
No. But
so I've run into that before, where building managers just don't get it.
Well, that's big union business. But anyway.
Yeah, well, it's like this trifecta of unions and just building management and the telecos that all fight with each other and try to lock each other out all the time.
Well, in every other country in the world, or most other countries in the world, the way it works is you buy whatever phone you want, but you're going to have to pay full price for that phone, but that's okay, because it's your phone, you can do whatever you want with it. And then you go, and when you want, to get a phone number, and you want, to have service. So you buy this little card, this little SIM card, and you put it in your phone. And now your phone works. Now let's say you fly over to the United States, and you want to keep using your phone, but you need to use it on a U.S. phone network. You take the card out, you buy a card from like T-Mobile, you put it in, and now you're talking on T-Mobile. And you go back home, you get rid of the T-Mobile card, you put your old card back in. So you can use your phone on any phone network just by switching out this little tiny card.
Why can't I do that in the U.S.?
Well, you can kind of do it sometimes, but let's say I go and I buy a phone from T-Mobile in the U.S., right, that works with these little cards, right? If I try to put, say, a card from AT&T in there, right? I want to use this phone on the AT&T network, maybe because I'm somewhere, I'm on a trip in California, maybe, so I buy like 20 minutes of prepaid calling from AT&T because they have better service wherever I am. The phone is locked. If I put a different little card in there, it just will refuse to work. It'll say, sorry, I'm not going to use that card because I am locked to the T-Mobile network and I will not use any other card from any other network. And every other country in the world doesn't work like that, except the U.S., because they don't want you to buy a phone from them, which, usually when you buy a phone from them, it's subsidized, and then go using it with other networks. Technically, they say on paper that if you ask, they will sell you an unsubsidized phone at the full price, and then they'll give you unlock codes and let you unlock the phone, but people have had varying levels of success with that. Very varying levels of success. Okay, so there's two big newses that have brought this about, and that's the build-up to these big newses, right? The first big news is that Verizon, until now the most evil of the cell phone carriers in terms of locking shit down and being assholes, has come out with a press release that says, by the end of 2008, we will allow any phone with any app. So basically, they're saying that by the end of 2008, any phone that will work with Verizon's network that they approve, that they're going to test the phones in their little lab to make sure that, they're not going to, be evil and like destroy the network with broken radios or anything. But, let's say, they approve the phone in their lab, and then they will let you use anyone who wants to use that phone with the Verizon network and run any application on that phone that they want. And that's how it's going to work, supposedly.
Now,
and this is a big news because this is like the biggest turn. Imagine the most evil person there is, who's like,
he's like, I have stolen all the candy in the world, and there's nothing you can do. And then
5 minutes later, he's like, candy for everybody,
forever,
candy for the babies, everybody free candy. It's like the biggest turnaround, and everyone's like, it's almost a too good to be true turnaround, and everyone's coming up with all these reasons like, it's evil because of this, it's evil because of that, it's evil because of this. And, Verizon as a whole is sort of weird company. Like, they're evil sometimes, and sometimes they're not evil. Like, when someone goes and says, hey, Verizon, give me all these, when the RIA comes to Verizon, and says, hey, tell us who these people are so we can go after them, Verizon goes, we're not going to do that. But then Verizon says, yeah, net neutrality, fuck that. So it's like, make up your mind. Are you good or evil? You can't be both.
I think they're mostly evil. Maybe they don't realize that what they're doing isn't that evil.
Maybe. I don't know. But, basically, if this is true, this is actually a great business move for them. Remember how I just explained how letting anyone use whatever phone they wanted with the regular phone lines was good for the phone company? Well, Verizon lets anyone use whatever phone they want with Verizon. That's going to be great for them, and this is why. People who are from foreign countries, right, if they come to the U.S., they're pretty much going to either buy a little card from AT&T or a little card from T-Mobile, right? They still might have trouble buying a little card from Verizon because Verizon doesn't work with little SIM cards, but there'll be a better chance that, maybe someone from, like, a country that uses CDMA will come here, and they'll be able to use their crazy phone on the Verizon network, and Verizon will make some money off that. Also, crazy nerds like you and me who want to use some crazy phone with some crazy applications on it, but Verizon, like right where I live, Verizon has the best coverage and the best service and the fastest speeds. That's just what it happens to be around New York. So people like me will be going with Verizon, even though we used to hate them and still kind of do hate them, because they're the only way we can use the phones and the applications we want. But meanwhile, they're not going to stop doing business the way they currently do it with the subsidized phones and the whatever. So all the normal people will still be making them lots of money that way. So it's basically, they're making everyone happy. And it's like, they have this other thing. And I guess if everyone took advantage of the any phone, any app, that might hurt them. But I think most people, only the nerds and foreigners are really going to take advantage of that. And normal people are going to keep going the way they're going. So it's actually a really good business move if it's true. Now, why are we skeptical of this? Well, first of all, Verizon, when they say, it's mostly all about the data service, right? Because, calling, whatever. It's all about, browsing the web and downloading stuff and watching YouTubes on your phone.
Why don't I just run Skype?
Actually, I think VoIP was one of the things in their press release they specifically said they were going to allow.
Wow.
Yeah. Because they're going, the first skeptical thing people are saying is they're going to be charging up the ass for this data service. They're probably going to be charging like by the bit rate or something. The more you download, the more they're going to charge you. Their plan is to like get people used to like exorbitant data costs. Because right now, Verizon unlimited data service, right, is like $80 a month for unlimited or something ridiculous like that. But it's not really unlimited. If you start using it in a way they don't like, they could just cut you off.
Yeah, the TOS are pretty much, we can cut you off for any reason.
Like if you start watching YouTubes on your phone, they'll just cut you off. It's like, what the hell? I'm paying for unlimited here. I should be able to do whatever I want.
Well, see, we've always had this problem in the U.S. because broadband providers always do the same thing. They say, yeah, unlimited bandwidth. And I think that's false advertising because it's never unlimited.
Yeah,
There's always some arbitrary and usually somewhat too low.
Yep. My problem is not that they're not providing unlimited stuff. I could deal with some limits because I've never go over those limits anyway. They're ludicrous limits usually. But the problem is, and of course, the reality of the world is that there isn't enough bandwidth to support everyone using it unlimitedly. It just doesn't happen.
But companies can't pretend that they can offer unlimited and then get mad and cut off customers who actually try to use their bandwidth.
They have to advertise correctly. The advertising right now is false, and that's the big issue. So, yeah, Verizon, they say they're going to open it up, and, well, we'll see how much they open it up. Now, my personal worry, all right, is that Verizon is pretty slow at getting new phones. Like, if a new phone comes out, Verizon is usually the last place to offer that phone. It's like you can get the new phones with everyone else first and then Verizon. And the reason is when Verizon likes to test those phones in their lab to make sure they'll have absolutely no problems. And that lab actually does a pretty good job because usually phones you get from Verizon are probably the least buggy. You know, like you buy like a Trio from someone else and it'll be crashing and stuff and whatever. Verizon generally really heavily tests their phones, and they work. They don't crash, at least. They don't make problems. They might not be the greatest phones, but they work because they were tested thoroughly. The thing is, those phones are usually old because they tested them for so long in that lab. And here's my skepticality is they're going to be testing, they're still not going to allow you to use a phone on their network unless it's been tested.
They'll probably test them slow enough to where...
They'll probably test them so slowly that it's like, I'm a nerd. I want to buy this brand new phone that came out yesterday in South Korea and start using it. But I got to wait like a year for them to test it in their lab. Someone has to pay them to test it in their lab, even though the fee might be reasonable. Someone still has to pay that fee. Who's going to pay that fee? I mean, the Korean phone maker, do they care? Are they going to make that much money by Verizon?
Are we going to see a bunch of websites spring up or people like on Fark saying, all right, everybody, let's all chip in and pay to get this phone tested?
And then 6 months later, the phone is finally tested, but then a new version of the phone comes out.
Yeah, the N81Q came out. No one cares about the N81DR.
Yeah. And, it's like, let's say you're a phone company, you're a phone maker, right? And you make a phone for Japan, right? And you think, some people in Japan might want to go to the U.S. and use their phones there. All right? So those people might want the phone to be Verizon tested so they can, use Verizon if they go to the U.S. And also, there might be some nerds in the U.S. who want to buy this phone because it's a really cool phone, all right? So they might want Verizon to test the phone in the U.S. Maybe that's a few hundred people from Japan and a few hundred people from the U.S. Is it really worth, even if the fee is reasonable, paying Verizon to test the phone and sending them the phones and dealing with them and fixing things if they want them to be fixed and all that bullshit just for a few hundred Japanese people and a few hundred Americans? Is that really going to be enough business to make it worth it if you're the Japanese phone maker? I don't know. It's going to be tough. So, there's another piece of Verizon news that adds on to this.
All right.
Right now, the people always talk about like the 2Gs and the 3Gs and the 4Gs and all the Gs, right, when it comes to phones. And basically, all that means is second generation, third generation, fourth generation, right? Right now, we're in the third generation. EVDU and HSDPA are third generation. That means it's faster. You want a 3G phone to use 3G networks and stuff because your phone will be better that way. You'll get faster data, a better connection, clearer talking, right? So if you're Verizon or Sprint, that means EVDU, and if you're someone else, it means HSDPA. Generation 2 is like GPRS and Edge and that sort of stuff, right? And that's what the iPhone uses Edge, which is G2. So that's why it's slow and why nerds complain about the iPhone being slow. G4, right, which is the next best thing, is pretty much stuff like WiMAX and stuff like that. But AT&T said, all right, we're going to use this thing called LTE as our fourth generation technology. Now, up until now, right, it's always been AT&T and T-Mobile picking this set of technologies, and then Sprint and Verizon picking a different set of technologies. So they always have different radios. The news is Verizon is also using LTE. So in the future, if the LTE is, going to eventually be standardized and everyone does their thing and no one's lying and sticks to their guns, you're going to be able to buy a phone that's LTE phone, which is going to be wicked fast. We're talking like megabits per second data here, like crazy. And that phone will work with pretty much any phone company in the U.S. It won't be like, oh, my Verizon phone won't work on AT&T, or oh, my AT&T phone will work on Verizon. No, if they're both going to LTE, which they say they are for the 4th generation, and if you're in an area with 4G coverage, you're going to be able to use your AT&T phones on the Verizon and vice versa. And that's sort of crazy. That's like the opposite of the way it's been forever. Like, I remember when I took my parents' old Verizon phone to the mall, and I was like, can you make this phone work? Like, it has a Verizon sticker on it. You can only use it with Verizon. Well, that's not going to be true anymore. It's crazy times. Crazy times. I mean, we could reach a point where, like, even if Apple sticks with their crazy AT&T contract, you can only buy it with AT&T, whatever. If the next iPhone is using, like, LTE or whatever, or 2 iPhones from now is using LTE, that iPhone will work with anyone. You won't have to be sticking with anybody. You could do whatever you want. And if Verizon says any phone, any app, and that includes the iPhone, you'll be able to get your crazy fast, crazy reliable coverage everywhere in New York with an iPhone. And that's, like, going to be the best thing in the world. If it's real. Which it might not be. So you got anything else to say about this?
Not really. I've been playing Worms for the last several minutes.
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea. But yeah, these are 2 huge newses going on here. And it's kind of weird because in the U.S., we're used to, when there are technology issues like these, opening of cell phone networks or net neutrality or whatever, we're used to losing. We lost in the, what was it? What was that court case?
All of them?
Yeah, pretty much. Except for the one with the encryption. We won that one. But yeah, we keep losing out on everything. It's like we fight for something and it doesn't quite turn out the way we want it to. They pass the DMCA, they pass all these other things. But here, it looks like this might be the first time things are starting to turn our way. And if you add in, DRM is starting to go away too, with recent news of, like Walmart and Amazon pushing to get rid of DRMs. It could start to be a good time for the geeks here in the U.S. Finally, our day may be coming.
Right, but I probably didn't talk too much. I was kind of busy today, so Scott had this episode kind of all ready to go. So
Well, basically, it was my news. It was going to be my news if we did a normal episode, and it was 2 newses combined.
Yep.
And we were just going to not do a show, but I was like, I've got all this stuff fresh in my mind.
And when Scott told me what he wanted to do, I agreed that we really wanted to talk about this now.
Because it's already sort of old. It's news from like a few days ago. So if I waited another week to talk about it, it would have been all stale.
Yeah, so I guess all I should say really is that this was not a normal episode of Geeknights. This is what we call a Geeknights special. That means we're either too lazy, too tired, or too busy to do a real show. So we do pretty much the same thing, but without music, or without all the news, or maybe a main bit.
In other words, the lazy show.
Pretty much. You'd be surprised how much easier and faster it is to do a show where we don't have anything in it but just us talking for a half hour.
Incredibly easy. Now I'm going to go play some video games.
This has been Geeknights with Rim and Scott. Special thanks to DJ Pretzel for the opening music.
Be sure to visit our website at www.frontrowcrew.com, where you'll find show notes, links, our awesome forum, a link to our Frapper map, and links to all the RSS feeds.
We say feeds plural because Geeknights airs 4 nights a week, covering 4 different brands of geekery. Mondays are science and technology. Tuesdays, we have video games, board games, and RPGs. Wednesdays are anime, manga, comic nights. And Thursdays are the catch-alls for various rants and tomfoolery.
You can send us feedback by email to geeknights@frontrowcrew.com. Or you can send audio feedback via Odeo. Just click the link that says Send Me an Audio on the right side of our website.
If you like what you hear, you can catch the last 100 episodes in iTunes or in your favorite podcatcher. For the complete archives, visit the website, which has everything.
Geeknights is distributed under a Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial Share-alike 2.5 license. This means you can do whatever you want with it as long as you give us credit, don't make money, and share it in kind. Geeknights is recorded live with no studio and no audience. But unlike those other late shows, it's actually recorded at night.